Hey guys, before we go any further, I want to tell you about one of my favorite marketing podcasts. I think you're really going to enjoy. Believe it or not, it's a fun and funny podcast about email marketing. That's what it's called, The Email Marketing Show. They recently did an amazing episode called 6 Lies Your Email Marketing Platform is Telling You, which I love because these guys are so genuine and real in their opinions about what is working and what does not in the email marketing world today. You should definitely check it out. You can go find them in your podcast player of choice as The Email Marketing Show, or go to their website at emailmarketingheroes.com. Entrepreneurs Enigma is a podcast for the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. It's about the wins and the fails that we all face being entrepreneurs, and how we learn from adversity. Every week I talk to a different entrepreneur with a story to tell. I'm Seth Goldstein. Come with me on the journey. This is Entrepreneurs Enigma. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Entrepreneurs Enigma podcast. I'm Seth, and I'm here with Mr. Nice Guy. He is nice by birth. You can say that about Canadians. He's Canadian, but he's in Tennessee. So hopefully we didn't co-opt the niceness too much for him being in the States for 20 years, 30 years?
15 years.
All right, so you haven't hit the 20-year mark. You still got time to be not as nice. Anyhow, it's Dave Delaney of the Nice Podcast, and Future Fourth is his company. He is a fellow podcaster on the Marketing Podcast Network with myself. Dave, how are you, my friend?
I am great. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, he's got that radio voice too, which is really nice.
Rodney Radio.
There you go, my friend. So, Dave, you are a corporate communicator, leadership trainer. You pretty much tell companies how to be nice to their employees, treat them right.
Yep.
Culture, communication, employee engagement. I'm cheating. I have your LinkedIn up on the other screen. And honestly, of all people, you have one of the best LinkedIns that's like spells out what you do above the fold. So I appreciate that. I don't have to scroll to tell people exactly what you're all about.
Thank you. Yes, I just celebrated my 15th year on LinkedIn. So
wow, you're an old hat on there.
I'm an old hat. Yeah, I've spoke for LinkedIn. They had a conference a number of years ago, and I was one of their keynote speakers.
Oh, wow.
And spoke about networking nicely using LinkedIn among other tools and tips, but of course with a focus on using LinkedIn. So yeah, I love LinkedIn.
And it's coming to its own too recently.
It's gotten better. Yeah, they did a big, not rebrand, but they updated their user interface years ago, and I'm enjoying it.
It needed it. I had something funny happen this morning. A recruiter wrote me and said, "Hey, how would you like to start your own business?" And I'm like, "We see you do podcasts. How would you like to start your own business?" And I'm like, I immediately wrote back, "I've been doing this for 14 years, running my own business. No, thank you. Goodbye, spam." So
yes,
LinkedIn still has its issues, but it's not LinkedIn per se. It's the people on LinkedIn not fully reading profiles.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for a long time about LinkedIn best practices for sure.
Yeah,
I find the best when you send a connection request to somebody, it should be somebody you know or you definitely want to know.
Yeah,
and you should always have a personal message
with
that connection request. I'm not a big fan of the in-mail paid requests. That sounds like what you probably received, because they come across as ads, really, or somebody has paid. And I have yet to receive something that was not a solicitation for whatever. So
I've been doing a big push lately, just connecting with a bunch of startups, and I do it all through connections. I'm like, "Hey, I want to have you on the podcast. You're an entrepreneur. I want to hear your story." I don't do an email. I mean, I have 49 email messages, and I don't even use them ever. Unless there's someone who, for some reason, there is a way to put it up, so you have to know the person's email address. And then I'm like,
yes.
I'll do it in email, even though I'm like, maybe I shouldn't even talk to this guy because they clearly don't get the idea of networking. So,
well, yeah. And, there's something to be said. If somebody has their contact information is difficult to find on LinkedIn, chances are maybe they don't really want to hear from people on LinkedIn, I would say that. But also, they might be in a senior role, like a CEO of a large, Fortune 500. Chances are they're not even using LinkedIn or
Yeah.
logging in frequently enough. So you're way better off, emailing them or going old school and picking up the old horn.
Yeah, well, what's that? What's a
I
horn?
know.
What's a phone? Man, we just dated ourselves right there. So Dave,
I know. I did.
yeah,
I did the finger thumb hang
yeah,
loose
hang loose,
weird
yeah, the
phone
phone thing.
thing, and it's now like the palm of your hand, and you just like
Yeah, exactly. You
swipe
swipe
up,
and you talk to your palm now. Exactly.
talk to your
So
palm.
Dave,
Yeah.
how did you get started? Let's start at the beginning. How did you get into the communication space? Where'd you go to school and all that stuff?
So I studied radio and television broadcasting, and I majored in radio broadcasting back in the day,
Hence the
and
voice.
hence the voice. Yes, and then I went back to school and studied business and marketing. Got a majored in marketing, Ryerson University in Toronto,
On the Great Way North.
the Great Way North. Yep.
And so were you ever on the radio, or did you kind of get there to get somewhere else, or like what was the idea of doing the radio stuff?
Yeah, I had moderate success in broadcasting, but not so much in radio of all things. So I had dreams and aspirations of being a jock on the
Yeah.
radio, playing music and
Yeah.
taking calls and all that fun stuff. So I'm also probably dating myself a little there.
Yeah, what's the radio?
Um, right, right, exactly. It's also probably why I got into podcasting in '05
Oh, yeah, you're
because
an
I was
old
like, oh,
hat.
wait a
That's it,
minute,
yeah.
I can do this. I don't need it. I didn't really land a job. Well, no, let me back it up for a sec. I was big into blues music
Oh,
back in
yeah.
the day. And so I got a gig interning for a national Canadian show called Blues North.
Ooh.
And I got to edit the show and help produce the show and even got to be a guest on the show. And the show was cool because it was played in the States as
Oh,
well
wow.
over, many different markets. And we played all like the best blues music. I have this crazy backstory of meeting Albert Collins, and
Wow.
that is a long but amazing story of meeting Albert Collins, the master of the Telecaster, who was my favorite living blues artist, and we became friends.
Oh, wow.
And so I got to share that story on the air. Sadly, after he had passed away,
Yeah.
but I almost dropped out of college to become a roadie for him. So
Oh,
go
wow.
figure.
Wait, well, you didn't, and now you
I
are a
didn't.
very well-known keynote
Yeah.
speaker in the communication space. So, how did
Yeah.
you go from radio and doing the internship to going back to marketing? And then
Yeah.
how did you find, I mean, a lot of people are always wondering, like, how do you find your way into speaking? I mean, obviously, you have to learn how to speak well, and you have to have good
Yes.
cohesive sentences and thought process.
Right.
But
Yeah.
how's that work out?
So I'm a bit of a ham, thus wanting to be a jock on the radio. And I ended up, getting jobs. I did work in television broadcasting and I did work in print media and I did act.
Oh,
And so I used to I've done like film extra work and all that stuff, but never really anything with a line. So sadly, not a
just
actual
just
movie
just
with a,
smiling in the background or walking by the
just
camera.
smiling. Yeah, I do have one clip that you can find me in the movie 54
Oh,
when
wow.
Ryan Philippe enters the nightclub. There's a slow motion scene and I go dancing past his shoulder, like right in front of the camera in front of him. I'm wearing this wig. It's hilarious.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
but I studied in addition to my education, I also studied improv comedy with Second City in
Oh,
Toronto.
wow. Okay.
Um, and so improv was really what gave me a taste for performance
Hmm.
and being on stage and being in front of audiences. I had an improv troupe when I lived in Ireland, and so I performed improv in Scotland and
Oh,
Ireland and
wow.
Canada. In fact, well, your listeners can't see the yellow poster behind me, but that's actually a Fringe Festival
Oh,
poster.
that's cool. Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, yeah. So getting back to the performance thing and speaking, yeah, I got a love for it really early on. There was actually an incident when I was in grade like two, I
Oh,
think it
wow.
was, or
We're
second
going way
grade.
back.
Yeah, well, so I was doing Little Red Riding Hood,
Oh.
and I was the axeman who would come to the rescue of Little Red Riding Hood when she was being, attacked
Mm-hmm.
by the wolf. And I got demoted from that role because I was misbehaving in class,
Oh.
and so they made me the tree.
Oh.
And so my job was to stand straight up with my arms across in a T tree shape, wearing my brown cords and my green turtleneck shirt.
Yeah.
And my job was to, like, as the axeman who had taken my role
Oh.
was cutting at me, and then so the scene was uh uh, he would be cutting me with the axe, and then he would hear Little Red Riding Hood yell for help and go to her rescue. But as he was cutting me, my job was to just tilt left,
That's all.
like just
Yeah.
tilt. Yeah, like he cut me and I tilted. And for some reason, maybe it was like the beginning roots of the idea of improvisation in my little tiny brain, I decided instead to fall flat and forward on the stage, like boom, and the entire audience lost their minds laughing.
That's
I
awesome.
stole the show.
Oh, as a tree.
And yeah, as a tree. And the teacher was the only one that was livid with me. And I think my parents might have been a little angry too. So
Well, they
anyway,
always say to show that they were livid, but they're probably in the backhand saying, "Oh, he's such a ham."
yes,
Yes,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
We're gonna take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and get right back to the show.
Hey there, it's Jason Falls. If your company or maybe one of your clients sells to marketers, you look for advertising channels that guarantee business marketers are paying attention, right? Let me introduce you to the Marketing Podcast Network. You're listening to it right now. It's a network of podcasts all about marketing. So 100% of MPN's audience are marketers. Reach them by advertising on the Marketing Podcast Network. Learn more and find our media kit at marketingpodcasts.net.
Yeah.
What a nut.
Yeah.
So you've always been extrovert, someone who wants to perform, show people what you do and all that. So have you always
Yeah.
been on your own, doing your own thing in corporate wise, or did you go do a corporate thing or other than the newscasting and stuff?
Yeah, I did the corporate thing. I worked for technology companies. I worked for Griffin Technology here in Nashville, a consumer electronics company, which was acquired. I worked for Emma, which is an email
I know
marketing
Emma,
company, which was also acquired.
There's a trend
so
there.
there's a trend, yes. So I worked for those companies when I moved to Nashville. I worked for Emma first and then Griffin. And I left Griffin a little over 10 years ago and went out on my own.
On your own, saying enough of this acquiring baloney. I'm
Yeah.
gonna, if anyone wants to acquire me, they can acquire me, but like I want to be in on that. Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
So 10 years ago you did that, and then was it Future Fourth at that point, or was it something else you were doing?
Yeah, I launched as like Dave Delaney Consulting
Yeah.
or something to that effect. And what was cool was I wrote a blog post kind of announcing, like throwing my hat in the ring saying, "Hey, I'm a free agent." And my phone rang off the hook kind of deal. Again,
Wow.
dating myself with an old
Yeah.
phone
Ring,
analogy.
ring. Yeah.
Ring, ring. Yeah. I had clients instantly. And,
That's
but even
awesome.
better than that, or I suppose that would have been the best scenario, but even better than that was a lot of peers, mutual friends, all kind of said, "Yay, like he finally did it."
Yeah.
Cause I really speaking at many conferences and like South by Southwest
Mhm.
and all these different tech conferences and so forth over the years. I had a lot of friends who were entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
doing their own thing. And it was exciting to have their support. Like, yes, he finally did it.
So what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur? Since you've done both, you've done like the grunt work, and you've done for the past 10 years, you've done it yourself out and
Yeah.
about. What's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
It's a good question. And, nowadays the answer might be slightly different just because working from home is quite normal. But my dad wasn't in the picture a lot. He was traveling and things like that. My parents were split. So I wanted to be as much as around as possible for my kids. And so a big benefit of working my own hours is I can carpool. I can tell people when I'm available to meet. Um, and so that's what I did. So I sort of built my business around being available to my kids to go on field trips. So on a personal level, that was the best aspect of that as well. So
Now, what's the scariest thing?
yeah, the scariest thing is knowing with all business, you realize that it's a roller coaster.
It's definitely
When you work for somebody else, and depending on what level you are in an organization, the roller coaster is taking place there too, except you may not know you're on it and it may not matter to what you're doing specifically. Now, if you're like the CEO or in the C-suite, then yeah, you probably feel that pressure too.
yeah. I'd say so. Yeah.
You definitely feel, yeah. So the scary part is really knowing that a client may end an engagement suddenly and you're like, oh, or that it just may end and suddenly you don't have another client. And so there are a lot of those moments when you're like, crap, you're doing really well. Things are going great financially. And then suddenly it's like, oh, crickets.
Yeah. Oh no, what do I
you
do
know,
now?
Well, and as a speaker, like that's a good example, right? Because I do a lot of keynote presentations and workshops for companies and for conferences. And so with COVID kicking in, needless to say, not getting on a lot of planes for a while
Yeah, a
there.
lot more virtual conferences, it seems like. There was a lot more like, "Hey, come on," but they don't pay as much because guess what? You're not out there in the flesh.
Right.
It's, they feel like it's not as much, and I'm always say, like, I think it's actually harder to do digital than it is to be in person because you have to sit still.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder for you as a speaker. I have a standing desk,
Yeah.
so I can stand and I have my clicker and I can do my thing. But I mean, I'm doing it to a camera and not to an
You
audience,
can't
right?
read this
And
well, yeah.
yeah, I mean, you can't read the audience. Obviously, you have no idea if your jokes bomb or not.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have a few in the can that I know usually work.
Yeah.
I think even besides my own experience as a speaker, more importantly, the audience, there's just no way to replicate the joy of connecting with people at a conference, right?
There
Like
isn't, yeah.
the just kind of spontaneity of it,
Mhm.
the serendipity of it, of just like meeting people in the hallway
The hallway
and
track, yeah.
yeah, the hallway magic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The handshakes and the hugs and the high
I
fives and all
know.
that good stuff.
Hopefully they'll
So
come back at some point. I think it
they're
will. They're
back. They're
back.
getting back.
COVID stuff, I
Yeah.
think, and we're kind of time sensitive ing that is a word, but we are putting this in a timestamp on this. But like, yeah, I
Yeah.
think with Omicron and all this other stuff happening, we're starting to figure out what to do with ourselves. And I think it's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I have no doubt that we'll be back to in person. I mean, there are a lot of different, maybe in a hybrid sort of
Yeah.
way, but honestly, as an attendee, if you really want to get bang for your buck, paying for a ticket virtually or whatever, you're way better off going to that event
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to meet people. And as I said, the magic's going to happen in those hallways.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a lot of content online these days. You can go to YouTube.
Yeah.
So if it's some level of expertise, not to downplay the importance of speakers, but my job as a speaker, it's partly to entertain, but it's also to empower audiences to bring them together so that they're
Mm-hmm.
making new friends and good things come from that.
Yeah. So, Art, so you are the founder of Future Fourth. You do the Nice podcast. What's the premise of the Nice podcast?
The Nice Podcast is a podcast for leaders of fast growing companies to improve how they lead, communicate. So I started it about a year ago, and it's just features interviews with thought leaders, with industry leadership primarily,
Mm-hmm.
but also with interesting people who communicate in creative ways. For example, one of my favorite interviews was with Richard Turner,
Oh, yeah.
who I'm a bit of a magic nerd, and not so much that like I don't do like I'll do it over cocktails kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's an amazing magician. There's a great documentary
Mm-hmm.
called Dealt about him. He's pushing 70, he's getting up there. The cool thing, and he's won awards for the close-up magic.
Oh, wow.
He's like
That's
the
tough
close-up
stuff,
magic
yeah.
guy. Tough stuff. And he calls himself a card mechanic because the things he does with his hands with a deck of cards, you can't even see what he's doing. But when they slow it down, you're like, I can't believe he is doing that.
Yeah.
He fooled Penn and Teller on their show. But here's the kicker to
Yeah.
this. And he would kick me because he's also a black belt in karate for mentioning it.
Yeah.
But I have to mention it. He's 100% blind.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so that interview with
Magic.
Richard Turner.
Wow.
Yes.
That is an incredible.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was I'll have to go back and listen to that one. That one's, I've listened to a bunch of
Yeah,
podcasts
you gotta-
that are great. But I mean,
Richard Turner, thanks.
I
Yeah,
enjoy
he was one of my favorites for sure.
that's awesome. And then, so Future Fourth is now, it's what you've evolved into. So Future Fourth is
Yeah.
really teaching people how to be Canadian.
No, because then they have to learn metric and start using use and all the words.
My
and
son today asked me what something is in kilometers. I'm like, why even bring up kilometers? Like, where's this coming from? We're all backwards.
I do want to say the U.S. is now officially the last country to not pick up and adopt metrics. I'm sort of on the fence with some of this, right?
Yeah.
Like 0 degrees Celsius
Yeah, it's 32.
is cold.
It's cold.
It's cold. It's 0, right?
Yeah.
Like that 0 is colder in my mind than 32, right? Like 0 is cold.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, 100 is hot.
Yeah.
Right? Fahrenheit. I mean Celsius, yeah. But 100, it just makes sense. So yeah,
It's
I don't
interesting.
know.
But 100 kilometers an hour is only what, 40 miles an hour?
Yeah,
I never got a speeding ticket when I was in Canada because I saw 100. I would freak out, and I'm like, wait, this is kilometers. I'm actually not going that fast.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
That's
right. So Future Fourth, you are teaching leaders how to enable their employees, treat them nicely, and all that stuff. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I do a couple different things. I deliver presentations and training for teams. And I do that virtually or in person, of course.
Mm-hmm.
This is all based on the NICE methodology that I came up with,
Ooh.
which is really about improving the way we communicate. I do workshops, and then I do ongoing consulting and coaching for executives and their teams as well on how to improve workplace communication and also ultimately like culture and employee retention. I have a calculator at futurefourth.com that people can check out. That calculator calculates how much it will cost you to replace talent when they're if you know that somebody's going to leave and their salary is 60,000, it's going to cost between 30 to 45,000 to replace that.
Holy cow. And then you have to then pay the person afterwards.
And your company takes a hit on culture when somebody leaves the organization, maybe someone who's been there a long time. So I'm trying to help leaders avoid this by improving how they lead and how they communicate and their teams communicate.
This whole Great Resignation.
Great Resignation.
I'm sure you're very busy right now.
To see how many people are leaving their jobs, and there's great solutions for that. Exactly. So I use this NICE methodology, presentations and trainings.
That's awesome. All right, and then we're gonna end on this one. What is the most important thing to carry with you all the time?
Treat people the way you want to be treated.
I love that. Yeah,
it's such a simple rule.
It's so missed. People don't get it. It's just be nice. Be nice.
Yeah, just be nice. I mean, and we can't. I mean, we were talking before, like, this doesn't mean pretending that you're like the happiest person on earth all of the time. That gets old. But it's about being nice. It's about treating people the way you want to be treated, and that goes, to your team members. It goes to your family, your friends, the strangers you meet. I always tell people, if you want to like judge, like if you're out on a date or like a business lunch or something, and you should always take note of how the person that you're with treats their server.
That's a good one.
And if they're a jerk to the server,
they're probably a jerk.
Then you can decide from there.
It's kind of funny. Jeff Foxworthy just popped in my head. How you know if you're a redneck? How do you know if you're a jerk? If you treat your server with disrespect.
There you go.
Hey, well, it won't be a podcast without a Jeff Foxworthy reference, right? Anyhow,
there you go.
Dave, where's the best place for people to find you online?
Yeah, drop by futurefourth.com. You can Google Dave Delaney and find me
pretty easily.
Most places as well. Yeah. But futurefourth.com is where you can find the podcast, my blog, my speaking information and all that other jazz. And then, of course, I'm on the socials at Dave Delaney as well.
He's the guy with the big smile. Because guess what? He's nice.
There you go. I do what I can.
Well, Dave, thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. And we'll see everyone next time.
Very nice of you, Seth. Thank you.
That was a great show. Hey, if you're enjoying Entrepreneurs Enigma, please give us a review on the podcast directory of your choice. We're on all of them. And these reviews really help others find the show. Also, if you're getting value from the show and want to buy me a coffee, go to the show notes and click on the link to help me stay awake while I bring you more great episodes to your ears. That's in the show notes, and I look forward to the next episode. Take care, guys. This podcast is one of the many great shows on the MPN Marketing Podcast Network. Goldstein Media hopes you have enjoyed this episode.
Hi, I'm Sarah Panus, and if you work in the content marketing space, I invite you to subscribe to the Marketing with Empathy podcast. Join me and other industry experts as we share ideas to help you connect with your audience to drive better business results. I've spent the last 20 years driving content for billion-dollar brands. Now I help marketers build winning brand storytelling strategies to reduce feelings of overwhelm and confusion. Think of it as a content marketing jam session mixed with chicken soup for the soul. Subscribe to Marketing with Empathy today.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.